pushed the go live button. It is loading up. And it is done. We are redirected on live. I am going to go ahead and start recording us here. All right. And we have attendees. So thank you everybody for joining us. This is part of the Young Entrepreneurs Program discussion panel that we're doing every Thursday now. And we have with us Carlene Hurdle, who is the director of, I'm reading this now because I want to get it right, director of the Lord Fairfax Community College Workforce Solutions, and Jonathan Mills, who is a corporate culture specialist, and Pablo Teodoro, who is the owner of the Great Harvest in Warrenton, Virginia. Thank you everybody for joining me.
Hey.
Thank you. Everybody's got their camera and everything ready to go?
Yeah.
So. Carlene, I like your room. It's very green.
Oh, thank you. It's not real, but
see, we'd have nenever known that. But thank you guys for coming. We are not here to reveal all the secrets today. But Carlene, actually, I'm going to start with you, since you actually work for workforce development as your profession. I'm going to start by asking you a little bit of a background. What is the workforce like here in Fauquier County? What did it look like a year ago, and how has that changed now?
Great question. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen just so that I can give you a few visuals. Let's see here. We just did this a minute ago.
Everything works when we test. Less so when we go live for real. But I think you can do it.
Let's see.
Let me know if you need me to do anything.
One moment, please. I mean, there it is. I can certainly answer your question without it, but I like having visuals. So it's a great question to ask. What is different now? Whoa, what happened? What's different now? And I think what's important to understand and really accept is that when we headed into this COVID-19, we were in a strong economy. So we're really expecting to have a good V-shaped recovery coming out of it. And so, you know, some of the things that we've seen here locally, and I'll talk a little bit about what that landscape looks like. But some of the things we've seen here locally are businesses being very creative, very innovative. I mean, it's a perfect time for people to really think about different ways to approach their business. And I know Pablo's got some incredible examples of how they've done that locally in his business. To give you a bit of a snapshot, this is the landscape of the occupations and where we've seen the biggest dips in occupations over the last 30 days. So obviously it makes sense that a lot of the food prep and servers that have been working in fast food and in restaurants, that's taken a decline. Maintenance and repair workers, think about our schools that, you know, they're visiting the schools and they're checking up on it, but that day-to-day operation is not going on. Obviously, retail's taken a big hit. And then,
you guys still with me? I'm not sure if it's you.
I'm still here.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
I think my internet connection is having some difficulty, but you're back up. You're good. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I was just giving a landscape of the occupational changes and shifts that we've seen over the last 30 days. Obviously, retail's been hit, but that gives you just a picture of locally where we've seen the biggest changes in our occupations. And then some of the top issues that are on employees' minds, obviously job security is at the very top, but then personal health, they're really thinking more about their personal health. So this is important for maybe employers who are still supporting their workforce, but trying to understand what's really important to them at this point. So we look at financial security, health and well-being, family, including all of this homeschooling that's going on, and then just productivity, managing it all and balancing it all when the lines between work and home are so blurred. And then what I find interesting, and the reason I put this slide up here, is some of the soft skills that are becoming important to employers during this time are not necessarily the things that you would think about. But if you notice, communication verbal and written skills, just that ability to connect. And again, I know, I think about Pablo and his business, that ability to connect with people, that ability to connect with customers, that ability to connect with your community, that is outweighing, as you see, a lot of other skills that previously really outranked communication. So I think that we're seeing a lot more of that within our workforce. That gives you just the highlights to answer your question.
Thank you. And I love those slides. Those are fantastic. And next, I'm sorry?
Is there more to come?
Oh, good. Next, I wanted to ask you if you could just explain for everybody, what does it mean when we say workforce? What does that term mean?
Sure. Didn't know I was going to go through all of the questions at once. I'll go ahead and reshare.
Because I know, we're used to hearing this sort of buzz terms, for all of us and in the professions that we do. But I think for some of the, teenagers who are watching right now, it might not be self-explanatory.
Right. Well, so I did create a very simple definition, but workforce is the people who are engaged or in or available for work within a specific geographic area or industry. And that's really become much more important, even in terms of where companies locate. If you think about it, a lot of companies think about locating in an area that has a dense, rich, skilled workforce. What we see here locally is that we have people who are not just unemployed, but also underemployed. And so really kind of getting around that with skills and skill programs and working with employers to identify the types of skills that people need to fill very important high demand jobs. And then I just wanted to talk a little bit about Fauquier County, some things that are very unique to the county. 57% of the people who live in Fauquier County leave the county every day to go to their jobs when we're not in COVID. Many of those are now homebound. And then about 25% of commuters come into the county, but only about 18% live here and work here. So I thought that was just kind of an interesting statistic to give you that really makes Fauquier County very unique from neighboring counties.
Excellent. And so I have an additional question for you. Hopefully you don't mind. So when we're talking about this and you're showing us that there are people who live here but don't work here and vice versa, when you use the term workforce or we say local workforce, what does it mean? Does it mean that we're talking about only the people who live here and will work here? Or are we talking about people who we might, I don't know if import is the right term, from a different county to come work here? Who do you describe under that umbrella of the term workforce?
Well, again, I think workforce is a broad umbrella. So it encompasses anyone who's currently working or is available and ready to work. And with such an incredible outbound commuter population, I think it's important too to increase the number of inbound commuters and to make work more accessible to those who live here. So workforce can mean any population of folks that are ready to work.
And do you know how that has changed since the coronavirus came about? Is there a huge amount of unemployment here, more available workforce here around? And look, she has a new slide. Of course you know.
So I did a comparison, and I don't know if you can see the very far right of this screen shows the incredible jump in unemployment at a national level. So nationally, we're sitting at about 14% unemployment. That's across the entire nation. Here in Virginia, we're not nearly that bad. We're sitting at about 4.5%. And then if you look just at Fauquier County, we're actually in pretty good shape. And I know this is busy looking. Here's Fauquier County. We're sitting at about 2.8% unemployment compared to the localities around us. In many cases, we are lower in unemployment than they are. So that, I think, makes a great selling point to anyone who maybe has lost their job or is looking to do what I call a reverse commute and come into Fauquier County to work. We have some of the lowest unemployment. We also have one of the largest small business backbones. And I think that bodes well for the county as well, because a lot of small businesses, while some may be hurting, others are still thriving and becoming innovative and creating new ways to approach business.
Excellent. Thank you, Carlene. That was great.
Sure.
Jonathan, I want to move to you next. If you could describe and relate how local workforce and the culture within that geographic or regional area affect small businesses, or vice versa. How do the small businesses here affect the culture of the people, and how do the culture of the people affect culture within business?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start with the thought of work-life balance, right? Something we talk about all the time. I think that's a myth. I think that's a bit of a myth, right? I mean, the truth about the relationship between employees and the place they work is that they both affect each other, and it's cyclical. So when an employee has a bad experience at work, they do bring that home, right? If they actually are able to cut off the experience, right, and flip back and forth, that's probably unhealthy. And vice versa, if someone's having trouble at home, if they have violence or abuse, or just having a stressed time, that's brought to work. Right, that's brought to work, in which case puts an employer in a position of having someone perform poorly or be absent or late to work, and they don't understand why, but there is a reason, right? And especially in small business during a crisis, this is going to be pronounced. Generally speaking, a small business, organizations with only a few folks who only have maybe a single layer of management or no layers of management, they're close-knit. They behave most like a family, right? Is a good analog for that culture type, where you have leadership in a highly influential role, and they're very close to their teams, and it's strong personal leadership. They don't function as much based on rules or procedures and policies. They function on trust. They don't need all the structure. They have personal interdependence, right? Strong relationships. During a crisis like this, people are anxious. People are stressed, angry, scared. Those relationships are going to be tested. So whether or not employees are virtual or still on site right now in a small business, it is extra important to focus in on things like emotional intelligence, good communication practices, patience, understanding. For larger organizations, they are also going to be forced into more of a family style culture. So where they have previously depended a lot on good rules and procedures and policies, when folks are at home, they're out of reach, right? You can't manage as effectively, so you have to fall back on good relationships. And so you really have an organization to personal life relationship that goes on, this exchange between the organizational culture and the at-home experience. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, I'm still crying over the whole there's no work-life balance, but
no,
yeah, that
that's
makes
not
absolute
real.
sense.
That's not real. Yeah.
And you're right, it is changing. And first, before I ask you about all the changes and shifts right now, I just want to ask you a more general question as well, in that, how do you perpetuate the culture that you want within your company? How do you find the people that will do that for you? Do you look for people who you think have the culture you are presenting in your company? Or do you pick the most qualified people and try to teach them and train them into the culture that you're looking to present to your company?
Unfortunately, the answer is yes.
Great.
You have,
cheers, bud.
yeah, well, it is. I will say that the needle in the haystack mentality is flawed. As an employer, I would not advise looking for that special individual amongst the many to hire, because you will put a lot of yourself into finding them, and both spending too many resources in your search and overestimating yourself and your ability to read character. Generally, we are not as good at reading character as we think. And generally speaking, the interview process is not very effective. So my advice for aligning your selection process with a culture you want is to get back to your personal and organizational core values. What are the behaviors, the beliefs that are most important to this successful functioning of your organization, and to the specific type of functioning, the type of behavior in your organization, and look for evidence of those things in your candidates. So if you're going to use past experience, weigh less on the experience in doing the specific tasks and skills that you need, and focus more on evidence of the shared values. If you find someone with a good values fit, then they can be folded into your culture, especially if you've been intentional about your culture. If you have, or if you've identified and to some degree codified the things that matter to you, the paradigms that you operate by, the belief systems that you carry, right? If you can say what that is and you're closely connected with it, then you are identifying behaviors and policies and messaging strategies, language, dress code that all aligns, right? So if your candidate is in alignment with those values, they will also be in alignment with those behaviors. Even if they are, even if they come from an apple company and you're an orange company, they're both fruit. If you can identify that commonality that's more important, you will be able to, I think, fold them in. And over time, generally this is kind of it's expressed by a trial period, but over that trial period and maybe longer, you'll be looking to see the evidence of that alignment and that character. And of course, that gives you a lot more information than an initial interviewing and onboarding process can.
Excellent, thank you. And you alluded to it a little earlier about, seeing shifts in people, especially now that everybody seems to be working from home, or the majority are. But can you also talk about the ways in which the pandemic and everything that we're going through right now with shutdowns and now reopenings, how things are going to start to shift in company cultures? What is that going to look like moving forward? How or will it be different?
Well, it will. It will be different. We should assume that, but organizational leaders and managers will react in different ways after the crisis. Making a couple of assumptions, I think that we will at least see some folks fighting hard to revert back to former experiences, right? Try to recreate past experience and return to a work culture that is pre-crisis. That's not especially realistic because now your entire workforce has a shared crisis, right? They have this shared commonality, and it is that is definitely going to rub against being able to return to business as usual. I think there's another group that will identify maybe some popular ideas for pivoting and some things that look good and have some polish. Let's say, hey, let's all be more virtual now. And because your neighbors are doing that, some leaders will also try to do that, but not for the right reasons. And you can end up with a shallow culture as a result, right? One that's just based on bandwagon mentality. Another group, and this is what I would encourage leaders to do, is revisit core values and purpose and spend a little bit of time being introspective about how your work experience needs to be affected by what we are going through. And hopefully from that kind of introspection and realignment with your values, whether or not they are the same or have now changed, you'll identify what behaviors need to change, what policies need to change. Also, that introspection needs to include having good conversations with members of your teams. Both folks that are, tend to be in agreement with you, but also dissenters, people that you don't necessarily agree with all the time, folks you have fights with, right? But that's valuable bubble breaking information. And if you can kind of go through that journey and prepare to revitalize your culture from the inside out, I think you'll have a much more successful transition out of crisis mode.
And I think you're right. And it almost feels to me like it's a time for a lot of what you said, a lot of introspection. It's a great planning period time right now as we're moving forward. Things seem to be going really fast while not at all for a little while. It seemed like this huge separation there. But we're at a point now where we know things are moving forward, and they're moving forward at somewhat of a steady, slow pace. And it's a great planning period, I think. But I also feel at the same time, it's a little bit of a musical chairs scenario right now for the workforce. I see a lot of people who've been out of work because offices closed, instead of allowing people to work from home, or because it's a restaurant, they couldn't stay open, or a retail store. They either had to lay people off or furlough them. And I think it's given a lot of people a lot of time to think about what they want to do and what kind of job they want to have. And so I think as those businesses start planning and moving forward, they may want to hire different people, or they may find that the people that they had don't want to come back. Do you see that possible shift in sort of a round robin approach to the workforce here?
That's hard to predict.
Yes,
right?
Bring your crystal ball, Jonathan. Tell me, is this going to happen?
Just do a little bit of that. Well, remember, as a hiring manager, as a leader in an organization, people coming back have been through a lot, right? They are wounded now. And the best thing you can do is reconnect with some of the most important tenets of leadership, and be ready to let go of some people in a positive way. Be ready to fire some people in a positive way, and be ready to open yourself up to new experiences and new types of personalities, characteristics, skill sets that you didn't need or weren't looking for in the past.
Thank you. Pablo, I'm going to move over to you now and see if
I don't know why these guys are doing so well. I'm taking notes.
Well, you don't get to pass. Sorry.
Brilliant. I'm learning so much.
As well, I'm hoping you'll share some of your experiences. I know when all of this started, you were, I think, and I won't talk for you, but, was the bakery going to be able to stay open a little bit, a lot? It's really not a whole lot of an option. I wouldn't imagine for your employees to work from home. But, how did that go for you, and what did you see? What shifts have you noticed in your employees or in your shifts with your business through all of this?
Well, it's definitely been an adventure. It's been startling. It's been overwhelming. It's been exciting for the most part. For the most part, it's been for us very positive. Now, prior to March 17th, it was dismal, and like most businesses, we were headed for what I expected to be the permanent demise of our business. And there were two changes that occurred on the morning of March 17th that hopefully irrevocably changed. I know, crazy word.
I love the vocabulary. Keep going.
To change our business. I really am hoping that it has changed it for good, permanently. And the first one was that it sounds so simple now, but a customer having a temper tantrum in the bakery over hoarding of bread and finding empty shelves at the grocery stores helped me realize that we didn't have that problem, and that all I had to do was let people know. And while it sounds so simple now, I don't know why it wasn't simple then, but it did. And the phone started ringing, and it really hasn't ceased ringing since then. So that helped to turn things around dramatically. The second thing was that, and this was probably the one that's the most dramatic and the one that's gotten the most press, was that we inadvertently entered into a partnership with every household in our community. And by that, I mean that the pandemic had created situations where the clients of the local food banks the number of clients was swelling. The food banks were overwhelmed, and the worst part about it was that they were experiencing the same supply chain shortages and failures that regular consumers were. They were not getting certain products from their normal suppliers, which are grocery stores. The chief product at that time was bread. So we had a customer who asked very innocently if she paid us, would we be willing to bake bread for the food banks? And the answer was, of course. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but talking about that on social media spurred a long series of donations, so to speak, that I don't really see as donations. We're not a nonprofit, we're a for-profit business. But here's the way I view it now, which is really the way it is. If you made a donation, you paid me to bake bread for you and give it to the food bank on your behalf. That's what you did. And so the entire community was, in my view, in my idealistic mind, the entire community wanted to support the food banks. They wanted to feed the members of our community that are the most vulnerable and that needed food, and the food banks needed the bread. And sure, everybody could just knuckle down and bake a loaf of bread at home and send that loaf to the food bank individually. But there's a lot of communication that goes into that and a lot of organization. Much easier to call your local bakery, pay them, and we'll do it, because we already have. That's what we do. That's our capacity. That's both our service and our product. That's what we did. So we've been paid literally tens of thousands of dollars at this point to bake. This week, in fact, is the week that we will tip over 5,000 loaves of bread that we have baked and supplied to local food banks since March 18th.
That is excellent. Carlene is giving you her applause there. So tell me, what's this done with your workforce? Have you seen employees? Are they, have any of them decided that they don't feel safe at work and you've had to let them stay home, not come in?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There, at one point we were operating, I normally have 30 staff members, all part-time or almost part-time. And At one point, we were operating with 15. So it was tough going for a while. Everybody was working long hours, a lot of stress, and so on and so forth. Um, uh, the change in our business paradigm was actually incredibly beneficial. I love what, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name, sir, but
Jonathan?
Jonathan,
Jonathan, yes.
you're brilliant. So the changes in our, I love how you basically described my business in very technical terms, in ways that I live every day. It was fantastic. So, but it was almost as though the paradigm that we operate in as a business on a normal basis became valuable during the pandemic. We were able to come together as a small group, work things out. You're correct. We operate more on with trust and expectation than we do with clear processes and policies, much to the chagrin of my process-oriented staff. And so the pandemic was wonderful. It forced us to become more efficient. The higher volume of product that we were making increased our efficiency in terms of batch sizes, purchasing, and so on and so forth. And so, in spite of the fact that we were baking loaves of bread, or we are baking loaves of bread at a significant discount, in other words, subsidizing the money that's been given to us, entrusted to us to help the food banks, we were able to generate, we were able to operate profitably in spite of the amount of money that we're pouring into that, because we were able to operate so much more efficiently. And I might add, happily.
Well, you also mentioned that normally you have about 30 people on staff, and at the beginning of this, or somewhere in the process here, you were down to about 15 people who were all working very not difficultly, but hardly, see, now I need your vocabulary now, please. Everybody was working really hard.
Yeah.
How about that? We'll use simple words right now. So did you at some point hire people? And if so, where did you find them during the pandemic? Most people were scared to be out without masks, or, in not so much public, but just around other people at all.
I've hired one person. There was a young lady that when she saw what we were doing on Facebook, she sent me an extremely well worded email. I was so impressed with.
I need her here now.
Well, she communicated for a teenager. She didn't communicate like a teenager, and so I put her off at first. I said, unfortunately, there's no way I can hire at this point. But then when things really got tough and we realized that we needed more help, and the crew members that had decided to self-quarantine or isolate rather, when I wasn't certain they were going to be coming back, I called her up, ended up hiring her. But she's the only hire. Everyone else, at this point, we're back up to 20, 21 and employees, and we're doing really well. We're doing really well with the number that we have.
That's excellent. So you pared down your workforce and just decided to remain lean.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's there's a certain amount of efficiency that comes with fewer people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, good. Carlene, I want to come back to you. I'm going to ask you to bring out your crystal ball now and tell us if you see any emerging trends in the current and local workforce. Do you have any predictions about where we're headed and what impact the coronavirus will have as far as small business hires and the workforce within that backbone that you talked about earlier right here?
Sure. Well, we do spend a lot of time looking at something called labor market indicators and labor market data. And so we've been looking at what shifts are occurring within education, what shifts are occurring in unemployment, what shifts are occurring in re-employment for people. And I can tell you what the community college is gearing up for is a lot of students opting for community college instead of going back to a university, at least for 1 year, so that they can get transfer credits, just out of a safety and precautionary measure, shifting to online classes. And then we expect to see a flood of career changers, people that Jonathan said they are wounded, they're hurt, they're burned from having been displaced at a time that maybe they really kind of took for granted their job security. And so we are expecting to see a huge flood of career changers. So people who maybe did one thing who are now going to enter another industry or another field. And then I would say what we're hoping to do through outreach and through any other mechanism that we can has always been the drum that we beat, is looking to the underemployed to see if they can upskill and get into those high demand, well-paying jobs. I did have a few more slides if you'll indulge me. If my slides are boring, if my slides are boring, I apologize.
No, I think they're beautiful.
I've actually done screenshots of most of them. So
I'll send them to you, Pablo. I'll send them to you.
Let's see, we've got Jonathan with the genius and Carlene with the beautiful slides and Pablo with the great vocabulary. It's such a great panel. I've chosen wisely.
So I think this really takes everything that Pablo and Jonathan and I have been saying, is that trust is going to be the new business currency. Only 46% of people believe that the system is currently failing them. Only 48% trust government, but a whopping 75% who are able to work from home and who are still with you, Pablo, they trust you. They trust you right now because you have kept the ship afloat during a big storm. So I think that trust is incredibly important. And I think that is what people who are out there looking to either make a change or looking to redeploy in a new field, they are going to be looking for a place that they can trust. So what Jonathan said about core values and hiring for fit is going to be that much more important from the employer side, as well as that person looking for the job. They will want to find some place that they can trust. These are just the anticipated demand. Obviously, 3/4 of it is going to be full-time work, but there is still a larger than usual segment of the population who will be looking for a part-time side gig, something to do in addition to their full-time job, or just as another way to generate revenue. For example, Uber Eats is up like ridiculous 4-digit percentage because they are delivering food, DoorDash, those kinds of things. So more and more people are getting into Instacart. I know a friend who has 3 college-age kids. All 3 are at home right now. And they're working in these, one is doing Instacart, one is doing DoorDash. I mean, so they're all taking these.
I thought you were going to say they were eating her out of house and home, and she was.
Well, that's probably why they're all working. And then a very small sliver are willing to do temporary. So, if you're looking for employees and you really want part-time temporary, just know that that's going to be a really small sliver of the demand that's out there. But to your point, Pablo, I know that a lot of small businesses in Warrenton do use part-time employment. You will actually have a larger pool coming out of this than you've had in the past. So I think that's encouraging. And then, of course, the usual career pathways remain the high demand career pathways. And so for people who are looking to upskill, Healthcare obviously is in great need, but not where people think. This is not the jobs working in the doctor's office, because a lot of those people were displaced during this or were forced to do telemedicine. This is going to be the hospital healthcare jobs, the respiratory therapists, the phlebotomists, the medical assistants, and obviously nursing just remains off the chart with sign-on bonuses and all kinds of things. So it's never been a better time to get into the healthcare field. Information technology, believe it or not, is really taking a very strong upward trend during this, particularly for anyone who is able to attain a security clearance. They are looking to add quite a few people into that pipeline, but they want them to be able to handle secure information. CDL drivers, I mean, Pablo hit on the supply chain and the incredible hit that grocery stores took. So there is this incredible immediate need. And the biggest impact of that need is that the DMV is no longer allowing testing for them. So, here we have a need, but we can't even get them licensed. So we're working with the state to try and reopen the DMV provisionally to get some more drivers, because that is a huge problem for the supply chain. There's a proverb that says that, skilled trade will always be in demand. And that's the case for our trades. We are seeing increasing demand for plumbers, electricians, HVAC licensed professionals. And I can tell you that in terms of entrepreneurialism, trades really does offer that, because you're always going to be in demand. You could, if you have some business sense, you definitely would be able to work for yourself or be able to start up a company in your trade. And there's so many success stories in our area of folks who have done that. And then I'd be completely remiss if I didn't point out that construction remains very strong. The infrastructure projects around Virginia have not stopped. I don't know if you've noticed, but they're all still out there working on 66. And I mean, they have, and we're very tied in with the HCCA, which is the Heavy Construction Contractors Association that's here in Northern Virginia. And all of those infrastructure projects are very strong. And that pipeline shortage is getting bigger and bigger. So heavy equipment operators, laborers, project managers, engineers, the list goes on and on. So for those people that are looking to upskill, for maybe those college students who are looking to get credentials and then perhaps go back and get their degree, these are some of the pathways that we're seeing and predicting are going to be in even higher demand than they have been in the past.
Thank you.
And then the only other thing I wanted to, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. I was going to ask you, when we're all done, if you wouldn't mind after we're off, do you mind if you email me those? Some of the people who are watching might want to see those slides again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And
but go
then
ahead.
We've talked, I think that we've all talked about everything going online and everybody being Zoomed to death with webinars and all sorts of things. And we are expecting the trend that we're seeing now, which is about 43% of everything that's continuing on in the education field being offered online, will scale back somewhat. I think it's going to take time before we're completely, back into hundreds of people on campus and those sorts of things. But we do expect that to normalize a little bit. Obviously, for some of those career pathways that I just described, there are hands-on practicals that go along with it. And there's only one way to do that, and that's in person. So we can't lose that. And that's all the slides that I had.
Well, you did a wonderful job. Thank you. Jonathan, I want to move it over to you and ask you, when Carlene was talking about the trends in workforce, how do you see that relating to our local small businesses? For small business owners, entrepreneurs who are planning to hire within the next year, I imagine that picture is going to look a little bit different. Not only are there going to be, different people available in our local workforce, but they may be employing different hiring mechanisms and methods, different mindsets. What does this look like for the average small business owner over the next year? So Carlene, just pass your crystal ball over to Jonathan. We're going to keep moving forward here and predicting the future. But I think, there are some trends that we definitely see happening for sure and emerging right now. So what does that mean for someone like me, an entrepreneur who's thinking about hiring within the next year?
Oh, golly, it's just a big question.
You don't get a pass here either. Sorry. I wouldn't let Pablo pass on a question earlier. So the hot seat's yours.
Oh, Lord. Well, you know, with all the trends, right? People reacting to the circumstances we've been through, just the way people normally respond to their experiences. I mean, everything that we have done up until this crisis was also in reaction to our past experiences. And we will see that the workforce will desire the things that they have been absent from. You know, give you an example, you know, millennials, right? Predominant millennials, they operate in metros and cities at a greater percentage than previous generations. But that isn't their sense of home, right? The image of home to that group, for the most part, is actually the feeling and image of being in a park, right? Their sense of family is, it's not the social life, it's holding hands with a loved one, right? There's a dichotomy between what we experience and where we are versus what we idealize as the things we want. And one of the responses that we might see from this experience, despite the continual trend into telework, and that should grow as a practice, right? We should adjust there. But I suspect we will also see employees come out of their home and be anxious to have a place to work that's not at home. Be anxious to spend time with coworkers and an extended social family that they've been missing. The type of connections that we've had an outpouring toward through Zoom and Facebook, right? You see people playing online games, connecting with family, having virtual parties. We'll go and we'll have those personal experiences, at least for a while, once we're allowed to.
So it sounds to me like not only is the hiring process maybe different, and the available workforce, you know, the availability of different people in the workforce as well as different culture in the workforce, probably mean about as much as does when you're hiring, what kind of benefits and things are you offering to people, that may be more thoughtful things, less dollar-wise benefits might be appropriate going forward.
Yeah, extrinsic benefits have a diminishing return. So the more that you can pump up intrinsic benefits like a sense of purpose and community, the better off your employees are going to be long term, and the more productive they'll be, and the more creative they'll be, the more motivated they'll be. But we also we might yo-yo a bit in the things that we ask for. And we want. So I think it's important as an employer, don't take for granted what your employees ask for right out the gate.
I would add to that I think that one thing that could make employers have a competitive advantage over others is the idea that they can continue to develop employees within their job scope. So if you hire somebody and then you have a developmental track where they can continue to learn new skills and grow within your organization, I think that's going to set you apart from employers who are hiring someone for a specific job with no real sight to anything different. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, that's perfect, because that's actually right in alignment with another kind of core human need, which is opportunities to pursue mastery.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We need to be challenged and have this constant balance and grind between hard work and reward for that work. Growing our skill set and advancing is part of that. So, you know, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. If you've read Daniel Pink, but
is that the good to great?
That's
no.
Jim Collins.
Okay, sorry, I'm getting my books. What is this book? Remind us.
Which book was that?
Oh, sorry.
On the spot
I know
again.
what you mean. Go ahead, move on.
Drive.
I thought maybe you had it.
Drive, I think it is.
Drive. Okay,
Drive.
yes.
Yeah, great book.
Oh, I have that.
Yeah. But yeah, well said, Carlene. And yeah, you know, get back to, get back to the fundamental things that people need and recognize all of the surface asks and motivations as surface asks and motivations, right? You're going to respect them and listen to them, respond to them, but they are not they're not the thing you're orbiting.
Thank you. And Pablo, I'm going to give you the last word. So what does all of this mean for your business moving forward? Are you ever going back to 30 employees, or are you going to keep it small? What do you think is going to be different about the culture of the staff you have there in your business in Warrenton?
I intend to keep things as slim as possible. These changes exposed a lot of opportunity that I didn't see before. It didn't simply galvanize my team, it galvanized me. One of the things that Jonathan talked about was change in management and leadership. I forgot exactly what you said, Jonathan, but I realized that that had happened. I became laser focused on what needed to be done and built leadership around that in a way, or leadership became such a necessity that I woke up to some things that I had fallen asleep on. And so, and then any extraneous things were needed to be eliminated. My staff simply, I don't want this to sound bad, but my staff simply needed to know what to do. And then they did it. I'm hoping, to answer your question, I'm hoping to carry that forward. It's almost as though, one of the things that's interesting, I'm in the 10th year of business, and when someone says, wow, that's a lot, I say, well, I think that means I'm 10 years old, as in a 10-year-old. And from a business ownership perspective, I'm not even in my teens yet, so I'm still learning. And I think the pandemic has taught me some serious lessons about business management, organization, leadership, culture, human potential, family, the difference between values and policies. Policies get thrown out in a time like this, and values are all that's left. Needs versus wants, and so on and so forth. So the paring down has been almost like a nice shower. We've washed off a lot of the mud and the grime that's been built up over time, and we're ready to rock and roll, get dressed to go to the party. So that's how I feel about it. So for us, the business events around the pandemic, not the pandemic itself, but the business changes around the pandemic have been extremely valuable.
Excellent. Thank you all.
And I do want to say this because I know there's a lot of people listening. The sense of mission that my staff and I have can't be understated, in terms of, and still the majority of our work is retail work, but a third of what we do now is work for nonprofits. We work on behalf of the community. We work for these food banks, and it's given us an enormous sense of mission. And part of the thing that we want to carry forward is we want to continue to serve the community in this way. So I just want to simply say that we are excited about moving forward with the community as a business, in ways that we talked about before and did in some ways, but now we're doing in a very meaningful, practical, and tangible way.
Thank you. And I know one of the things I've seen just from this panel today and from other discussions I've had is how much of our discussion of small businesses, whether it's about management or the business itself or the processes or the workforce, is all now so tied to our value system, more so than it ever was before. It feels like anyone who's going to hire or be hired really is going to need to be so aware of and a big fit for the value system and culture of the company that they get into. That I think it's really going to start to move forward more slowly and intentionally than it ever did before, but in a way that is much more fitting and appropriate. I'm also seeing a lot more partnerships like yours, Pablo, where for-profit businesses are partnering more with the community and with nonprofits, which just seems like there can't be a bad end to that ever.
No, it's great.
And I know it just all feels good. Right now I know so many people have suffered through all of this, but right now everything just feels like it's so intentional and valued and thoughtful moving forward from here that I only see good things coming. And we have just 2 more minutes, and Carlene, I am going to donate them to you. I think you had something else. I don't know, do you have a beautiful goodbye slide? But I know you had something else you wanted to say.
I just was thinking through all of this, and back in the 1600s, there was a plague across London, and Sir Isaac Newton was forced home for a year in quarantine. And that is where he began to birth calculus as, a way of doing math. And I don't even like math, but
I was going to say, there are a lot of people who are not happy about this now.
But I mean, think about how many systems and how far we've been able to take technology and all sorts of things that rely on that. So I think what comes out of these sorts of things, something as big as this can be exceedingly important. And one thing that, one well that we go to get fed is Pat Lencioni, because he talks so much about healthy organizations and healthy teams and healthy forms of leadership. And so Andy Stanley did a podcast with him recently and said, what is the one thing that leaders need to be focused on? And this has been epitomized by everything that Pablo has said and Jonathan has said. And so I just thought I would wrap it up with a nice bow with this sentiment, because what he said was, be exceedingly human. He said, trade professionalism for personalism and really care at a time like this, because no one will ever look back and say, gosh, I wish my boss had not reached out quite so much, or gosh, I wish my boss hadn't cared about me quite this much during this time. And so we've really taken that to heart. We've been doing all sorts of free things to just pour into people, to just try to give ideas and give back to the community. And I think, Pablo's to be applauded for doing that as well. And, it's not that none of us ever didn't want those things. It's just that I think we weren't as in tune to them before. And I think now we can just all be that much more exceedingly human.
You're right. It's become a much bigger priority. It was always something that we'll do when we can, when we have time, when we have money. And now it's just now. There's no someday anymore. And I like everything that everybody has said. Thank you so much. You really did humanize and personalize and help us visualize the future of the local workforce here. I really appreciate it. And I want to tell you and anybody else who's watching, if you would please at the end of this, share this video, especially if you have any teenagers who are interested in business ownership. That's what this series has been about. And it has been a program that's being run through the Economic Development Department with a lovely grant we've had from the Path Foundation. So if you know any teenagers who are interested in getting into business, this is who we're trying to do this for, to benefit them and their education, moving them forward. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Carlene, Jonathan, Pablo, I really appreciate it. And I'm going to let you guys go. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
See you guys later.
Bye.